All right, welcome back to Diesel Talk with Tony Salas. That's me. Well, let's get right into it. Let's not waste time because some of you guys just watch like a second and then you go, I'm over it. I got to keep your attention. All right, first of all, when I teach diagnostic technicians or techs, anybody that works on trucks, one thing I tell them to do is always develop a diagnostic strategy. Now, our topic is going to be turbochargers, but before you get into turbocharger, you got to remember that you need to have some items in order for that turbo to work correctly. So with that said, a diagnostic strategy that I like to have is, what's the complaint first of all? You verify the complaint. Is the complaint there? And in this case, does the truck do what the customer is saying that it does as a shop? We find that out. You open the hood, some of these guys immediately see the check engine line and they get what I call the scandal stupids, what is going on under the hood, what's the condition of the batteries? I mean, let's face it, you're dealing with a truck that has 98 point some percent electronics in it. So, it needs power. So therefore the batteries play a key role. So therefore batteries are very important. So dirty terminals, and that's not okay. We have to have good charged, good quality batteries going on. And when I see an optimal battery on one side, and I see an interstate, another battery on the other side, that's not good. We got to have both quality batteries of the same, like Group 65s that are used on Powerstroke 6.7s and 6.0s. Check air filter. I can't tell you how many times maybe you've seen some of my other videos where we have found issues with the air, something as stupid as the air filter is restricted and clogged, Engine oil. What's going on with the engine oil? Is it heavily blacked? Is it heavily sooted? Is there anything done to the truck? Have they deleted it? So in this case, you want to look for some of the obvious. You don't want that to kick your butt. But you also are paying attention to the safety items. What's going on with the belt? I mean, if the belt's already, coming apart, yeah, you don't want to be working on a truck because that could sling out of control and hurt something, so, or yourself. So in this case, what's going on with the hoses and wiring? I believe in what Ford was talking about doing the wiggle test. So definitely want to wiggle stuff and see what's going on. You want to scan for codes at that point. So when I see instructors teaching, I'm sorry, it's teaching crap saying that, oh yeah, you got to connect the scan to a computer is only as smart as what the programming offers. There are some smarter systems than others, but if you're looking for the almighty answer from the scan tool immediately, yeah, that's not good. So in this case, you want to look for other stuff. Now, from a business standpoint, the trucks sell themselves, because if we do these checks, we might be selling an oil change, we might be selling air filters, we might be selling belts, not because we're trying to, get money out of the customer. It's just the fact that it needs it, it needs it. So it's also an opportunity to find business too, but it's not intentionally to do anything or rip off the customer. It is to say, hey, you need this stuff. Sorry, but you need this stuff, So at that point, we scan for codes after we've done the visuals and checked the basics, wiggled and jiggled wiring and so on. And you want to scan for codes, diagnostic trouble codes. And like I've said in previous videos, a diagnostic trouble code is a what? It is a test. So therefore, something has been tested and it passed. So on a Ford product, since we're talking about Powerstroke 6.7, it applies to 7360s and 64s, is to run a key on engine off self-test and key on engine running self-test. So in this case, this is telling the onboard computer to say, hey, dude, I need you to test yourself and see if there's an error. So it'll run a series of tests. And if a test has failed, then you have a code set, and that's going to lead you to a direction where you need to check. But don't bother doing any kind of scans if you haven't checked all the basics. If the air filter's clogged, like I said, we've had air filters clogged. And one of the other things is to check the exhaust. I recently had talked to a technician, and he was telling me he was having a problem with this truck where the truck would fire up and then it would die. And then he's telling me the whole story, and I'm like, this truck was running with the after treatment or the DPF and the SCR equipped on the truck. And what had happened is that, they ran it with a tuner. So that means they never ran a regeneration to clean it up. So I said, do me a favor. I go, this sounds fishy. Disconnect from the downpipe. There is a flange. Unhook the flange and get the after treatment out of play there. You're just, separating the downpipe and let the downpipe just exhaust out without going through the after treatment system, DPF, SCR. Tell me what happened. And the engine quit stalling. Well, it turns out he had a restricted exhaust. So that's one of the key things I also teach, is that you don't want to be diagnosing drivability engine running problems, lack of power, turbo boost issues when you have a restricted exhaust. And the best way to do it is to, unhook that flange that is at the downpipe to the start of the whole after treatment or exhaust system. So something to keep in mind. So then the question asks, okay, if I have a problem, is it fuel related? I'm going to check the pressures and the lift pump pressures and the rail pressures and compare with actual and desired. The EGR, I'm going to see if it's stuck open or not, what's going on with it. And then is there a boost issue? If it's lack of power and I don't got good fuel economy, what's affecting boost? EGR can affect boost, So in this case, if EGR valve's stuck, it's got too much gases coming in, it's going to drop the boost and lose power. And is the exhaust restricted, like I said earlier, with the after treatment related, And is there an issue with drivability? I mean, transmission, is there something going on with the transmission that could affect the drivability too, So always remember, when you got any kind of drivability issue, fuel related, boost related, EGR related, low compression, like it says on the last line, that's all going to affect your after treatment system, which is, again, if you haven't grasped what I'm saying about after treatment, that is your diesel particulate filter and your selective catalyst reduction. So yeah, there it is. I can do another video more intense on this, but I guess what I'm telling technicians that are working in the trade is follow a diagnostic strategy. I've stood in front of conventions and stuff where I speak, and I've said, hey, the truck has a crank no start problem. What's the first thing you want to do? And I can't believe a guy will say, oh, crank sensor. Oh, it's got a lift pump problem, fuel filters clogged, blah, 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 which are all possible issues, but that's not a strategy. You got to have a strategy on how you diagnose. So since we're focusing on turbos, let's talk about the 6.7 turbos. A turbo's only as good as the engine that it's running, but always remember something. Any kind of turbocharger, one of the things it needs is heat, and that pressure is the heat that we need. Obviously, there's such a thing as too much heat too as well, but the point is I'm trying to make is, do we have enough heat there? Because fueling can take a major toll. So my frustration when I talked to technicians this morning for a while, I was at the shop and they were telling me about, how this truck had injectors and it was, it just didn't have any power. And they're saying it's got $10,000 worth of things it needs on this truck, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, it could be injectors, because if you buy these by Joe Schmo Blows injector rebuild service and they don't know what the fuck they're doing, it's like the injectors could be it, because an injector has to have so much of play. In other words, that's all shimmed and calibrated by Bosch, on these piezo common rail injectors. I mean, everything has a calibration, and it's not something you could just take apart, clean up, and yeah, I could put it all back together. Yeah, sure, you can take nozzles off and clean them or replace them, but the rest of the body, hell no. So turbos need heat, and fueling is very important. So that's why in previous videos I talked about the spray paint test. I don't know if you guys remember the Mitch spray paint test. If you've seen the videos, what it is that you take a spray paint, spray it on the exhaust manifold. Yeah, just spray it. Go ghetto there and just spray it. And in this, I'm being smart ass, but anyways, what you're doing literally is spraying, and what you're going to do is fire up the truck, and if that paint don't burn off of the exhaust manifold, you definitely got a fueling problem, So in this case, it should be burning off. You should have enough heat there. So there's a quick tip there. But anyways, as we talk about the Powerstroke 6.7 turbocharger, it is manufactured by Borg Warner, and it's had some other owners and passed from General Electric to, but anyways, that's another separate subject. But in this case, the Garrett style turbochargers, we know it was just a modified version of what we saw on the 6.0 and even on the Duramax LLYs and laters. Yeah. So in this case, same manufacturer, but the biggest pet peeve that we had with the 6-liter when we compared it to the LB7 Duramax that used the same turbo, excuse me, not LB7, LLY. And in this case, the variable vane turbos, I'll show you a brief video here on that, but is the fact that, you actually had no, what's the word I'm looking for? God, I just went blank. In other words, there's no feedback. There's nothing telling it, because when I test a turbo on an LLY Duramax, all I got to look at the scan tool is desired variable nozzle position and desired variable nozzle. So if it wants 10%, 10%, 20%, 20%, 30%, 40%. In other words, of those vanes opening and closing. So if you don't know what I'm talking about on those vanes, hold on, it's coming. I'll show you a brief video on this. But in this case, what I'm trying to say is that you're going to have a feedback. Well, Duramaxes opted to use a variable vane position sensor, so vane position sensor. So in this case, the computer always knew the positions of the vanes, while on a 6.0 and a 6.7, no 6.4, 6.0 and 6.7, the computer was only guessing the position of those vanes, believe it or not. So I guess when you think about it, what is telling the computer the position of the vanes? He has no idea. He calculates it. He rehomes itself but he doesn't know exactly where those vanes are at, but he guesses it. So what is the main inputs that a computer uses? Both exhaust pressure and manifold absolute pressure, which is the boost pressure, you could say, and the exhaust pressure. So therefore, that's what it's looking at. So with that said, the early versions of the 6.7, which was called a Scorpion motor, it actually had a variable vane, but it also had a wastegate. That's what we're looking at right here. That is the wastegate right there. So in this case, that was a vacuum actuated or vacuum controlled wastegate. So in front of that motor, in front of the injection pump, there's a vacuum pump, which is not only used for the EGR bypass, but we're also using vacuum to control that wastegate. So yeah, there was a wastegate being used there. So when you saw the cab chassis versus the pickup on the introduction of this, there was narrow frame versus wide frame. So in this case, the cab chassis truck, which was designed, like an ambulance chassis, if you want to, a motorhome, whatever, those are the cab chassis. The pickups are the Super Duties, okay, F250, F350, F450, 450, and so on. Those were using the wastegate with the variable nozzle, while the cab chassis was just variable nozzle. And then to top it off there, and let me backtrack here on the slide. Oops, I guess I'm gonna have to show it on here. As a matter of fact, let me zoom it up. You're gonna see that it actually was a dual setup. There was two, I don't know if you could see that, but there was two impellers that were actually creating boost. So if you look very closely, there was two, a low pressure setup and a high pressure setup. So therefore you had two, I guess, turbine wheels there utilizing to create the boost on these models. Dual boost was called by Ford. So in this case, that's what they called it. So in this case, that created the adequate boost that you needed, right? Right. So that's what we saw. Now, on the side of these puppies, you're going to see there is an actuator there. So therefore, there's the turbo actuator. That's the solenoid that sits on the side. Don't worry, I'm going to get to that too. But in this case, that is what's controlling the vane. So it's a two-wire connector. Us as a shop, we tend to stock these puppies here because we actually can test them too, along with the pigtails. So the pigtail, the connectors are always hurt. They're always, ears broken off or something. So we can install a new pigtail because we've seen loose connections causing boost issues. So check that connector going to that turbo right there. So, very good. So, but anyways, the other thing is when I hear about turbo leaks, the base of the turbo itself, as you can see here, has both oil and coolant. So therefore, the coolant maintains the temperature of the turbocharger, but there's also oil. So therefore, the oil is used not only to lubricate the turbo, but also for use for the turbo actuator. So it's an electrohydraulic setup that we're using there. So we use oil pressure, engine oil pressure, and we also use some type of solenoid that I just mentioned, the VGT actuator, that's actually used on the turbo to move those variable vanes. So let's keep going. Now, it's imperative, as I was talking about leaks here, that this gasket must never be reused, and you need to torque it to specifications. So in this case, that ensures a good seal. So when I see a sloppy job being done, the truck will come in with an oil leak, especially on the top of the engine valley. So in this case, that means some goofball did not correctly seal or torque. So torque wrench should be your best friend. You got to torque those 4 big bolts that hold down that turbo, because if not, you're going to wind up with a leak. And make sure the surfaces are clean and so on in order to do that proper repair. Now, since time is of essence here, and I'm still keeping you awake, right? Got you here? You haven't left? You haven't clicked? All right. The other thing is, in 2015, we saw bye-bye to the wastegate. Now, I haven't confirmed this, and I always forget to call Ford to ask them about this, but I'll probably update you and put it on the comment later on. But what I'm trying to say is that they got rid of the wastegate. No more wastegate, and they went with one big turbocharger. So in this case, the wastegate is gone. The reason why I say I haven't talked to the dealership is because I am told, but I haven't verified this, that when you call the dealership and you need a turbo for like a earlier model, like a 2012, they're going to sell you this turbo, no more wastegate. So stay tuned. I'll figure that out, but that's what I'm told. But hold on to that thought. But the bottom line is, as a general information here, is that for 2015 to 2019, we went to the one big turbocharger on these applications. So it's still got the actuator, still got the variable vanes, but it's just an enhanced version of what we saw with the cab chassis, but it's a bigger turbo. So in this case, it's more robust design, as engineers like to use that word, robust. So in this case, you're going to see a difference there. So there is no wastegate there. So no more wastegates as of 2015. Now, what happened in 2020? In 2020, 2021, and we saw the Borg-Warner turbo come about. So therefore, that one has the big fat square actuator on the front of it. So we won't talk about that guy here. But yeah, they went to a Borg-Warner. But these are still Garrett-style turbochargers, just like your 6.0. So we started off with wastegate and one for the cab chassis that had no wastegate. And then in 2015 to 2019, we have one turbo that's actually used with no wastegate. So there you go. Okay. Now, when you look at, what's going on with the turbo. So hopefully this will show up here. A turbo naturally spins. You see the blue and the red, and we see that we're boosting air. So in this case, boost means to add pressure above atmospheric pressure. So if atmospheric is at sea level 14.7 psi, anything above 14.7 is a boost. Now, in the exhaust side, like I said, we need heat. That heat and that pressure from the exhaust on both of the manifolds on the 6.7 generates that boost that we need in order to create the power that we need. So power is boost, right? Well, if we flip this puppy around, you're going to see that there's variable vanes right here. And those variable vanes, as you can see, are, once again, opening and closing. So that ring that's moving those vanes is called a unison ring. And we see the variable vanes opening and closing. So with that said, that is controlled by some type of actuator. So in this case, this actuator is moving and closing those vanes. So in this case, on this animation, what we're looking at here is we see that there is a solenoid, and that solenoid is controlling the engine oil pressure. Let me pause this for a second. Now that engine oil pressure comes in through here on the top. So you'll see an oil line on top of these turbos, both on the 6.0s and the 6.7s. So in this case, that oil pressure is going to be diverted either to exhaust or to apply oil pressure. And what are we trying to do? We're just trying to move this puppy right here. So in other words, this piston, let me backtrack here. And in this case, you're going to see this piston right here. And in this case, that piston is moved by, again, applying and releasing oil. So if I apply oil pressure through this passage, it's going to fill this gap and push this piston to the other side. Now, as you see that piston moving, that is it's moving a rack and pinion, which actually moves the unison ring, which is opening and closing those vanes. See that? I know, said it kind of fast, but you can always press rewind. But let's look at it a little bit closer. Excuse me, wrong button. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to zoom this papuchla here, and we're going to show this. Okay, so as I press play here, come on, not I won't be able to, but let me backtrack. Let me play it, and let me move it forward. There we see the rings. Hopefully we can see this as I zoom it up. You're not going to play zoomed up. Okay, well, what I was trying to do is actually show you once again that the movement of these vanes are attributed to the fact that the rack and pinion is moving them, which is this guy over here. But these vanes open and close. Now, as the vanes close, let me stop there. Watch the speed of the wheel here. And what you're going to notice, it slows down and speeds up. So as, for example, as I'm going 65, 75 miles down the highway and I need more power, I'll hit the accelerator, the vanes are going to close. So therefore, I'm going to see more boost created. And then as I back off on the accelerator pedal, let's say I'm starting to cruise a little bit, the vanes will open up. So these vanes open and close. So let's play this again. What I'm going to see here is as the vanes close, we should see this wheel spin faster. So come on, let's go. There we go. It's starting to close, spins faster. See that? But when the vanes open up, they slow down. Now, why does that happen? Well, let's backtrack again. So in this case, they're closed. What's happening is that the area between these vanes where my cursor is right here is either becoming narrow or is becoming more open. And what it is, it's called the Venturi effect. The Venturi effect is actually creating more speed. So that exhaust is coming up with more speed, but the problem is it creates more back pressure. That's the Achilles heel or the weakness of these turbos, is that as these vanes close to create more boost, that means it's a narrow passage. On one side, you're going to have higher pressure, but on the back side, you're going to have a lot of pressure too being built up because you're restricting the flow. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is the weak part of this is that it generates a lot of back pressure. You know, that's the bad thing about them. So when we talk about a sticky turbo, what usually sticks is this actually the unison ring right here. So this unison ring right here is actually closing right there. So it's not closing, excuse me, it's opening and closing the vanes, but it's actually sticking. So a lot of guys that like to tear them apart, which I don't do anymore because it's just not worth the money and the crap and the labor to take that turbo in case it don't work right. Do it yourselfers. You guys like to do that, more power to you. But you know, the power of the price of a brand new 6-liter, I can buy a brand new 6-liter turbo is a lot cheaper. But anyways, let me get out of that. Still got you there. You haven't hit click yet, right? But anyways, what it is that these vanes are creating a venturi. So if I could see this opening right here, as I hit play here again, you're going to see it again. This opens and closes this gap right there. So again, opening and closing the vanes, more pressure, spins it faster, opens up, less pressure, therefore not as much being created. This turbo can spin slower. So what is the advantage of a variable vane turbo? Well, the advantage of variable vane turbo is that it can create, it acts as a small turbo or a big turbo. You see, wastegate style turbochargers, what happens is that they create boost, 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 and finally the wastegate opens and pressure dumps, boost goes bye-bye. Again, builds up again, wastegate opens, it dumps. Here, it can vary the boost. So therefore, I can have 10 pounds of boost, I can have 15 pounds of boost, 12 pounds of boost, all within the movements of these variable vanes. But like I said already, the problem on a 6-liter and on a 6.7 is that the computer has no clue of what these vanes are doing, you know. So therefore, that's the problem. It looks at boost. Hey, I'm getting boost. It's looking at exhaust pressure. Yeah, on a 6-liter, the exhaust pressure is there, but it really doesn't add a lot of feedback in terms of controlling what the turbo can and can do. Now, going back to the actuator once again. Okay, what's going to happen is, again, this actuator is just merely a spool valve that, again, channels oil pressure to the center or to the outward and also release this pressure. Here you can see the pressure coming out of this, and this is all channeled by the spool valve that spool valve within the actuator is doing to move that rack and pinion. Hold on a second. Let me come back here. So in this case, this is moving the unison ring right there. You can see it right here. So what's moving this piston from side to side on this part of the rack and pinion is oil pressure, pushing on one side to the other. That's why it's imperative that oil be properly maintained for proper life of these turbos, because it not only lubricates, but it also acts as the, you know, the coupler, or shall we say the actuation that makes this piston move from side to side to move this rack and pinion in order for the unison to open and close those vanes. So that's what we're seeing there. So when guys look at sticky turbos, I know I mentioned the unison ring, but what can also cause a turbo to stick is poor quality oil that actually can stick this piston right here. What else can do it is the spool valve. Has a lot of gumming going on right here. So in this case, that spool valve can stick. So therefore, that's what can happen too as well. So in this case, not a good thing. So, you know, all I'm saying is that in order to prevent issues with the turbocharger, you want to always what? You always want to go ahead and, hey, do I have good quality oil? Good oil, good. And again, there is no intake or boost leaks going on. But speaking of leaks, moving on, is like I've shown before, one of the tools that we use is to find leaks. And that's something that you, if you don't have a smoke machine, well, that's okay. You may want to look at the boots and closely inspect those boots and quit being cheap in buying a new boot. Call Ford, call whatever auto parts store you want to buy and get some new boots. If the truck has over 100,000 miles, it's okay to say, hey, here in Vegas, we get dry rot. We get intense heat, intense cold. So in this case, it's a good idea to replace those boots and clamps if so fit. But in this case, on a 6.7, on a 6.4, we do smoke tests because we're trying to find leaks. You'd be surprised on many trucks that we do smoke testing, how many leaks we find all over the place, from the intake manifold to the EGR base gasket, and also the boots that you can see here. So that's a nice thing about having a smoke machine in order to find any issues. And like I said already, Another problem that we have with creating boost is the fact that I need to have, again, good I need to have good exhaust, because the back pressure that I'm generating is not good. So imagine this, as we're looking at boost, I already showed you this video, but here's the thing. If we're working on a 6-liter, right? For example, on a 6-liter, the story I classically tell guys, along with a 4, it also works on a 6.7, and that is I tell them, okay, you're driving down the road, right? And all of a sudden a rock goes across the charge air cooler on a 6.0. We have a separate coolant cooled charge air cooler on a 6.7, so it won't happen on a 6.7, but it'll happen on a 6.0. But I'm trying to make a point here. The point is that you got to put yourself in the computer, and the controller saying, okay, I'm controlling the actuator on this turbo, and I'm making the oil go either direction to control the position of those vanes in order for me to what? In order for me to create boost. So if you forgot what the hell I'm talking about, is this guy's right here. So therefore, who controls this is through the, like I just showed, through the rack and pinion. We're actually, opening and closing to create the boost, right? So, oops. So in this case, the question is that, what tells the computer where those vane positions are at? There's nothing. On a 6.0 and on a 6.7, there isn't nothing. So the thing is, his mission is to create the boost. So again, going back to where I started, the computer is playing the role here of the controller. He's the man that's deciding what's going on, right? So what's happening is that, once again, you're going down the road, and let's say you're pulling, I don't know, 20,000-pound trailer behind you, right? And in this case, you're driving, and there's a 6% grade coming up, big 6% grade coming up. And in this case, all of a sudden a rock goes across that charge air cooler on the 6.0. Now what's happened to boost? Psh, it's leaking out. All of a sudden, the map sensor, which is measuring that boost, is saying, he's telling back to the computer, I got no boost, no power. Now the driver sees that he's got no power, so what's he going to do? He's going to press more on that accelerator pedal. No power. Again, the computer's going to the map sensor saying, dude, what's going on with boost? The map sensor, I got no boost. So in other words, how long has that truck been running with those vanes continuing to close? Because when the map sensor says he's got no boost, the computer doesn't know what's going on with the vanes. He's just going to close them more and more and more and more. So what's going to be created? A lot of what? A lot of back pressure. So as we see in the animation, once again, let me skip over here. If he wants more power, he's going to close these vanes more, and he's going to keep them closed. So the problem is, as we keep them closed, as we see in the animation, closed right there, there's not enough gases going across here. There's not enough pressure being relieved from the exhaust, because the exhaust manifold are sending that exhaust right here to these vanes. In other words, all exhaust, and hear me correctly, all exhaust must go through those vanes in order to go out the downpipe. Okay, did you hear me? All exhaust must go through those vanes in order to go down the downpipe down to the exhaust. So in this case, if these vanes are closed, that means you're creating a hellacious amount of pressure. But it's not so much the back pressure, it's the intensity level of heat that you got there. So when I hear that head bolt stretch, when you see a head and head bolt stretch, it's because that piston is fighting all that back pressure, because you got that pedal slammed to the floor, max fuel, but no boost, but creating a lot of back pressure because these vanes are really closed. So the reality of this, you may not have learned this from anybody, has been the fact that when these vanes are closed dramatically because there's a loss of boost, maybe a boot came off or something, is because the turbo is commanding those vanes fully closed, as you can see here in the animation, and that creates problems. So therefore, this is what I don't understand from Ford. Ford, I love you guys, sorry, but Duramax, the engineers at Isuzu GM said, hey, we're going to put a vane position sensor there. So on a GM Duramax 6.6, he knows the position of those vanes. So if those vanes close for too long, the computer program will say, hey, it's closed too much, it opens up the vanes. That's why we don't see as much head gasket failure on a Duramax application. So in this case, that's a big issue. So with that said, Ford didn't use it on a 6.0 and didn't use it on a 6.7, which can lead to head gasket failures or just massive heat being generated. That's why I was elated to see the 2020 truck, because it went with Borg Warner. It's still variable vanes, somewhat like this design, But there's a big fat actuator, big fat square actuator in front of it. And that actually monitors the position of the veins. So if the veins are closed too long, the computer will kick it out and open those veins. So if you didn't get what I'm saying, let me conclude with this. If you're driving a 6.7 liter or 6.0 liter and there's a boost leak, maybe a boot came off, or like I said, a rock went, or there's a hole in the charger cooler, whatever, right? You lost boost. The map sensor is going to tell the computer, I got no boost. I only got atmospheric pressure. And what's going to happen is the computer is going to continue to close his veins, thinking that he needs to close his veins further, right? The back pressure is increasing. You're putting more heat, more stress on that engine, right? Because you're putting your foot on the floor because you need power, but you don't know there's a loss to boost. So finally, the thing's probably smoking like a chimney stack, especially on a 6.0, while on a 6.7, right? You're just creating high temperatures that you're going to hurt something eventually, right? That's why in the early days, I wasn't surprised to see valves breaking and dropping, because the back pressure is the temperatures are so high. Even oxidation or rusting can take place on the tip of injector. It erodes the injector too. That's how hot it gets in there, along with moisture. So with that said, the 2020 truck to me is a better truck, a far better truck, because of the turbocharger actually has that actuator that's really good to see. So in other words, he will close like a Duramax. He will open those veins up in case there is too much closure and too much back pressure generated. So there you go. What do you think? Helpful? Did you click? All right, you can click now. Get out of here. That's it. Thanks for watching Diesel Talk. Give me any comments. Happy New Year. And we'll talk to you till next time. Thank you.